Another great reason to use a unmodified monotub is that it makes harvesting the mushrooms extremely easy. You just float them up and chop them down. This method works great for perfectly grown mushrooms or extreme side pin grows. So this would be the next step pretty much after you've colonized your bulk substrate, which I've shown in previous videos how to do that. And then you put it into fruiting conditions and let it colonize the entire substrate. This one tub especially, I know I showed two here, but the one on top I left sitting in the sun probably for like 5 days or so. I wouldn't just leave it there static. I'd rotate it, check the temperature, make sure it wasn't overheating. But it definitely dried out a little bit. But it did colonize faster too. At least I thought it colonized faster. I was surprised one day. I looked at the tub, just giving it a misting. I thought it was colonizing well, and there was already all these side pins, like not just a couple, it was like solid side pins all along every side of this tub, and I think it was a result of leaving it sitting in the sun. Not so much the light exposure like a lot of people will say, but the actual heat would have increased colonization around these areas and taken moisture away from the surface too, because I would have to crack the tub when I'd leave it sitting in the sun so that it wouldn't overheat. So as a result of leaving the tub the way it was and cracking the lid so it wouldn't overheat, it also allowed the whole substrate to shrink and pull away from the edges, creating a great microclimate for this to happen. I decided to harvest here because I was hoping to correct the growth. I probably should have let them grow at least until it looked like the veils started to tear. So for this method, you'll need the hose for siphoning. And you want lukewarm water. You don't want it to be too hot or too cold. It should just be comfortable on your skin. And also some knives. These were not great knives. These were pretty shit. They were sharp, very sharp. It was more the actual width of the blade. They grabbed kind of like cutting tomatoes can be hard. So yeah, I decided to harvest all these side pins. I just use a clean towel to put the mushrooms on as I harvest them. You can use paper towels too if you like. Make sure you've got kind of warm water, not too hot, not too cold. And just start filling from one corner. You'll usually find there's one gap somewhere more than another on this substrate between the tub and obviously on this tub I have all the gap in the world with the pins growing up on all sides. So that was not an issue. You do absolutely want to make sure that you do not flood the top of the substrate though. The water should just be coming from underneath. These mushrooms will actually start soaking up the water pretty quickly in this situation too. So if you are going for specific weight, you might find that's a little skewed by this method, I suppose. I just take it pretty much right up to the top because it, especially for this one with all the side pins primarily, made it way easier to reach them all. And I thought I was gonna be cutting them off of the side pins, but the way that they growed, they kind of curved around the substrate a little bit, so it made it tricky to just get straight in there with a knife. So I harvested most of them by hand and then occasionally got in there with a knife too. I was hoping by just kind of ripping them off, I'd leave less of a stump and it would be less likely to do it again. If you've watched my other video, you've probably seen what I tried to do to stop future side pins, and it seemed to work out pretty good. It's just basically filling the gap with coco coir and vermiculite, but using only vermiculite or only coco coir would also be fine. And of course, to reach the other side, no reason to reach around. Just turn the whole tub very carefully so you don't flood your kitchen or anything. You can see the tubs I'm using, they're pretty angled. I have wondered if it would be better to use ones that have less of a taper from top to bottom. Maybe that's also part of the issue, but I'm not too worried about it. It's still decent fruits to harvest, and it was a pretty good harvest too, ultimately. Yeah, the only thing I feel like I still could have done better with this tub was actually letting these side pins grow longer. I probably harvested them pretty early, but at the same time, if you err on the early side rather than the late, they should be higher potency too. Ideally, you'd wait until you start to see the veils tear, and that's pretty much the ideal time for size and psilocybin content. I suppose using the knife a little more and actually cutting off some of the substrate would have helped prevent future side bends too. But it was really easy. It could even reach around to the bottom and kind of feel if there was any big ones there. But let's move on to something that's far more interesting than side pins, and that's harvesting ones that grow where they're supposed to on the top of the substrate. So exactly the same process as I showed you previously, and this crop is obviously much healthier, growing on the top, not on the sides. I'm also currently on these mushrooms as I narrate this video, because why not? So this first knife I used, like I mentioned, was not great. You want to start from the outer edges of the tub or the substrate, just because they might pull a lot of water in the mushrooms, so you can actually start to see the whole thing sink. But if you just keep working from the edges first, then you can maintain some buoyancy from the edges. Yeah, the other knife was also not great, as I previously mentioned. We're getting to the best knife that there is pretty soon, I hope, because it's painful watching this. It was actually like a serrated, I think they're tomato knives. You used to see these marketed a lot. But it's absolutely perfect for this. It just cut right through them. Made it so easy. So I suppose maybe any serrated knife might actually do this, but this one especially was just kind of razor sharp and serrated. Just made it very, very easy. And the benefit of cutting them this way is, for one, it's faster. Very, very clean. You don't have any substrate stuck to the mushrooms, so as soon as you cut them off, they're basically done, ready for whatever your next stage is. And the stumps left behind actually create a perfect microclimate for new pins to form also. You may have noticed the one problem with filling it as full as you possibly can is that you might start to splash some water out. The other thing is this substrate is actually pretty thin as far as that goes. It could have been twice as thick, and then obviously it would be a lot more rigid, and this probably would have been even easier to do. But still, it's really quite simple if you've ever harvested mushrooms yourself. You know, it can be kind of tedious getting every single individual one. And that's about the last clump there. So next we move on to siphoning the water out of the tub. I went ahead and used a bucket rather than just dumping it down the drain so I could take the water out, water trees, garden, whatever. I probably would have, yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to start a siphon. I don't actually like hold my mouth on the end of the hose. I kind of create a gap using my hand, like making a fist around the end of the hose, and then it's just my mouth to my hand and pull the water in. If I'd used slightly shorter or more flexible hose, you don't even have to use your mouth at all. You can basically the same like you've done all your life, playing with water in a straw. You could just fill the hose up with water, put a hard kink in it, or close the end with your thumb, and then pull the water up, and that'll start the siphon too. Obviously, the greater height difference you have when you're siphoning, the faster it'll go, because water pressure is created by the height more than anything else. That's the engineering bonus for it. The higher you are, the higher the water pressure. Does not matter. I think that was the only time I choked on water, but maybe not. So we're almost there. Come on now. Once we get to the last little bit, it helps a lot to just prop the tub up with something. And then, yeah, you could still get a siphon started, no problem. I was kind of surprised myself. And you really do get it right down to the last drop. Depending on your climate, maybe you want to skip a few days of misting and fanning. But that's it. That's it for harvesting. It made a really cool pattern on the top, seeing all the bruises from the stems and stuff. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, whatever. See you next time.